living and working abroad in a post-pandemic world. Cepee is the founder of She Hit Refresh, a global community for women aged 30 and over who want to break free from a life of routine and start a life of travel, specifically to move abroad or travel the world long term. Welcome, Cepee.
Hello, hello, Mariella. Thank you so much. Lovely to be here and great to see you.
Good to see you as well. Joining Cepee in conversation today, we have Noelle Johnson, who is a global DEI strategist and trainer with over a decade of experience working in operations across industries and has been recognized for her expertise on mentorship and sponsorship. Noelle, thank you so much for joining today. I'll pass the mic to both of you. Thank you for kicking us off today, and I look forward to taking notes and learning from my globe-trotting women here today. Thank you so much.
Well, and I loved your introduction to yourself and to this group. Thank you, Mariella. All right, well, I'm so excited to get into this conversation with you, Cepee. So just to kick us off, let's talk about what's been going on over the last few years here. So what would you say, how the pandemic has contributed to the uptick in interest to move abroad? Because I know that I definitely fell into that camp.
Yes, thank you so much, Noelle. Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of things have changed in the past few years that have caused this uptick of interest in people really wanting to change their lives in a big way. And when I say people, I'm talking about really Americans right now, US citizens who are looking for a way out. I think number one, with the pandemic, remote work became a thing. A lot of us were working remote before, but there was a big portion of the population who didn't have that option and that perk and found themselves with this ability to untether their lives and thought about the possibilities of actually moving somewhere outside of the country. So I think that, along with countries that made it a lot easier, a lot of countries were unveiling a digital nomad visa, so a visa allowing Americans and other citizens to come live in their country for a year's time. But I think on top of that, even before the pandemic, it was already happening with the political situation in the US, the political strife, the racial strife that was going on there. I think a lot of people were just fed up with what was happening and also where they felt the country was going, and were looking for ways to live in an environment that was more aligned with their values. And then four, I think the way the pandemic was handled in the US, no place handled it perfectly, but I think there was just a lot of uncertainty and people were just looking to go somewhere else. So all of that has caused the uptick.
Yeah, and that feeling of safety, maybe I can find it outside of my own country. So I've definitely been seeing a lot of that on my end as well. Why would somebody consider moving abroad? So you touched on a few of those things, but what are some other reasons why somebody would decide to just pack up and go to a completely new country?
Yeah, well, I think that, everybody has their reasons for wanting to make a big change like that. But I think some of, reasons why someone should consider moving abroad. I think one, the improved quality of life. I mean, I'm from the US, I live in Spain. I love the US and had a great life there, but I can say that my quality of life has definitely improved abroad. I think one, because in the US, we know that we are hard workers. Work is our identity. A lot of us live to work. People have, we have some of the lowest vacation time in the world. And most of us who have that vacation time don't even use it all. And that's really rare. When you come to somewhere like Europe, people are getting 4 weeks plus and they use it all. And sometimes they use it all in one go. So I think quality of life in so many terms, not just with vacation, but I think in terms of that work-life balance can be improved when you move abroad. I think safety is a big one. I'm from Texas. The US, as we know, and even living abroad, I see this on the news way too often in the US, the gun violence that's happening there and violent crimes. I would say in a lot of places in the world, it is a lot less, especially because guns just aren't as popular over here. Quality of health and affordable healthcare, not only quality, the US has great quality, but also we know it can be really expensive. So moving abroad, you can access great healthcare for a really affordable price. And I think another thing to consider is, you only live once. If you've always had this dream to move abroad, or maybe it's something new that you've thought about that you want to consider, why not try it out? I mean, you really have nothing to lose. All the comforts that you may be afraid of leaving in the US, those will be there if you choose to return. So if not now, then when?
Yes, I love it. But let's talk about some of the downside. What would you say would be some of the misconceptions that people have about moving abroad? They're ready for their whole life to change, and then they're going, wait, this isn't quite what I expected. What would you say?
Definitely. Well, I think even before they make that leap, I think a lot of people, a lot of Americans think that it's impossible for them to move abroad. So even if it's something they'd love to do, they don't actually really look into it or consider it as a viable option for themselves. A lot of people think you got to be rich, or you got to get transferred with the company, or you got to get married to move abroad. And the reality is there's so many other ways to make it happen. I was none of those three things, and I was able to move to Spain. And moving abroad isn't expensive. It doesn't have to be. But I think one of the big misconceptions that a lot of people have is that, if you have some great skills in the US and you've had a fairly easy time finding jobs in the US, I think people think they can just apply for jobs on Indeed and LinkedIn in other countries and they will, just get an interview as they do in the US. And it doesn't actually work like that. It's actually pretty difficult to get hired abroad.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, let's talk a little bit more about that. So that seems to be one of the biggest obstacles that folks have when they're looking to move abroad. So what would you say, how easy is it to work in another country and to work remotely with that also the trouble of finding work?
Yeah, yes. I think this is really important thing to consider if you want to live abroad, if you want to work abroad. A lot of people are doing this, like I said, with remote work, but there are some obstacles that you have to be aware of. So one, if you want to get hired by a company in another country, is it difficult? Well, it depends. It depends on where you want to move. So it depends on the country. It depends on your skill set. And it depends what you want to do. So the easiest way to move abroad is teaching English. Outside of that, it can be very challenging to get hired. And so the reason why is that most countries have to prove that they can't find someone local within their country that has the skill set that can perform that position before they're allowed to hire you. So that can be really difficult, especially in a place like Europe. I think a lot of people would like to move here, but not only, let's say if you want to move to France, a French company doesn't only have to prove that there's no one in France that can do the job, but they have to also technically prove that no one in the whole EU can do the job. So that can make it quite difficult. If you're a highly skilled worker, you'll have a better chance of finding a job and getting hired abroad that's outside of the teaching English realm. But to say that, I don't want to discourage anybody. It's definitely not impossible. I got hired here in Spain. I worked, from a Spanish startup, so I was able to acquire a work visa. So it can be possible, but I think probably an easier way if you want to live abroad is to take your work with you. So going back to that remote work piece, if you already have a job in the US and you're allowed to work remotely, if you're able to, you can take that job with you abroad. And that way you don't have to worry about that obstacle of finding work abroad. Also, I will touch on that. One of the obstacles, though, if you do have a remote job, a lot of employers in the US will not allow their employees to work in another country. And that comes down to some legal aspects and taxes. But there are ways around that. Power to Fly is an incredible company. I was a part of the Power to Fly team not too long ago, and Power to Fly is a global team. And so there are ways that companies can work with you to find ways to have their employees work abroad. But another way I was going to say, if you're not an employee of a company, if you're a freelancer or self-employed, those are other ways that you can live abroad, because a lot of countries have specific visas for freelancers and those who are running their own companies. So, and if you're a contractor as well. Seeing if there's anything else that I missed here. There are so many different types of visas out there. So don't just look at work visas. If you're trying to move abroad, definitely take a look at those digital nomad visas that I mentioned that a few countries have, like Georgia, Estonia, Croatia. A lot of the islands in the Caribbean have them as well. Spain is supposedly coming out with one later this year. But there's also non-lucrative visas, entrepreneur visas that I mentioned, and those freelancer visas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what are some obstacles someone can expect to face when making a move to any foreign country?
Definitely. And I just wanted to mention, whoever's out there watching, I can't see you, but if you have any questions, let us know. Happy to answer them. I'm sure as I'm sharing information, there may be questions popping up, but some of those obstacles, the number one is going to be the visa. So we're just talking about a variety of visas, but unfortunately you can't just pick up and move to another country and start your new life. There are the legal steps that you have to take and the bureaucracy that you have to go through. And the number one factor that's going to allow you to even live abroad is if you qualify for a visa. So that's going to be the big one. And a lot of countries, you can stay up to 90 days as a tourist, but to stay any time longer than that, you're going to have to do your research. I wrote a book during the pandemic called I'm Out of Here, an American's Ultimate Visa Guide to Living in Europe. So if you're interested in, living in Europe, I've done the research and outlined the 17 easiest countries to live in, and there's over 50 visa options that you may qualify for. And those cover, student visa, retirement visa, and some of the other ones that I mentioned. Another obstacle is, I touched on that is, if you already have a remote job and you want to, take that abroad, you need to talk to your employer to see if they will allow you to do that. One of the companies that can help kind of be that middleman between yourself and your employer to allow you to work abroad is remote.com. So talk to your employer about them if they don't have a system in place. Allowing employees to legally move abroad. And then I think some of the other ones are pretty obvious. I think the language barrier, it does take time to learn a foreign language if you're moving to a country where the native tongue isn't English. But don't let that discourage you. There are people moving abroad, all the way through their 70s and 80s that are learning languages. So, with time, you will do that. And I think don't underestimate how long it takes to really set up a life abroad. If you want to move somewhere long term, it is going to take you, I would say, anywhere from 1 to 3 years to really get your grounding, to really build your new world abroad, to find your community, build that community. And that's okay. Just know that it does take time, that it's not just all going to happen overnight.
Absolutely. If we backed up a little bit, what should somebody consider when they're thinking, I know I want to be a digital nomad, I know I want to be somewhere else in the world, but what should they consider when choosing what city or what country to move to?
Yes, this is such a great question because not all countries and cities are meant for everybody. So I would say, after you figure out if you do qualify for a visa, and if you want to be a digital nomad and just go somewhere for three months, you probably don't need a visa for most countries. But if you want to stay there long term, figure out your visa. But also, are you a city person? Do you like hustle and bustle? Do you like the slow pace? That's really important to know. I'm a city girl. I'm from Houston, and I lived in Madrid for 5 years, and I love the big city vibe. So know if going back to the language aspect, do you want to learn another language? Maybe you don't. Maybe you just don't have time for it. You're not interested. You don't want to find places where you're going to be able to communicate and meet people who are going to understand you. So prioritize language, prioritize where in the world you want to live. I've talked about Europe a lot, but there are other regions that are just as popular and great places to live. I would say Latin America is great, especially for Americans who want that proximity to the U.S. to visit family, for healthcare if they want to continue with their same doctors. So think about where in the world you'd like to live as well. And I would say the other thing is, what can you afford? Not all places are the same. If you want to live in Zurich, Switzerland, you're going to be in one of the most expensive countries and cities in the world. But if you want to come live in, southern Spain, it can be a lot more affordable than the U.S.
Absolutely. And that also reminds me of another challenge that people can have when they move to a new country. They love the country, they love the city that they're in, the work is going good, but now it's the day-to-day. How do I build a network so I don't feel so lonely? They may know 1 or 2 people, but if it's not a country that they know a lot of folks, how do you build a community in a country that you're not from?
Yes, I love this question too, because a lot of times throughout our lives, we're building community and friends through school or work, right? And so if you're moving abroad and you're not going to work for a company and you're not in school, then you really have to put the effort in. So this is where I think this takes a lot of proactivity to find your community. I would say tap into the online world. I know a lot of people aren't big fans of Facebook, but Facebook groups are where it's at. That's where you're going to find your people. And Facebook is great. I have my own Facebook community for She Hit Refresh. That's my community for women over 30 who want to move abroad. If that's you, join that. But there are communities out there. If you're looking to move to Italy, look for expats in Italy, Americans in Italy. If you want to move to, Bangkok, Thailand, look for expats in Bangkok. So definitely tap into the online world, because not only can you start making friends even before you move, you can learn a lot about the place. And once you're in a country, if you don't want to just be online, you definitely want to meet people in person. I would definitely say meetup.com is a great resource to go to, and just really making the effort. I can't stress that enough. I would say making friends is a little bit like dating. You have to, kiss a lot of frogs to find your prince. So you have to hang out with a lot of people to find your community. And so I think it's really important to say yes to a lot of things, even if you don't feel like it, and kind of like try out different friends. A lot of us may not have had to make new friends for a long time. So you just kind of have to build that muscle again of what it's like to start over and make friends. But it will take a lot of effort on your part.
Yeah, and it's worthy time. Absolutely.
Yes, definitely worth it.
Yes. So what would you say are some more popular places that people are moving to right now?
Yes, so the most popular places I would say are Portugal and Spain. And there's numerous reasons why. I think one, Portugal has become very popular because getting a visa to move there is relatively easy for Americans. Also, they have a great tax break for Americans, so that's something to look into. Also, great weather, less expensive. So it's a great choice for people who want to move to Europe, Portugal. And then Spain as well. So I moved to Spain in 2015. There are tons of Americans here all over the country. Again, it's a relatively easy visa to get if you want to move here. It's a lot cheaper than the US, great healthcare, great weather. And also for those that want to move to Europe, these are probably the two easiest countries of entry. But like I said before, there's so many places to move in the world. Mexico is another really popular country. Again, for those coming from the US, it's really close to home. Wonderful culture, people. And it's, what you see on the news in terms of safety. Living in Mexico is a much different experience. And also Asia is really popular. Maybe not right now, right now with COVID. So maybe give it a little bit of time. But Thailand was probably one of the most popular destinations in Asia to move to before the pandemic.
Well, when we take a look at moving to these different countries, and I'm actually somebody who was working on my visa to Portugal, and life happens. I'm still in the US, but it's 100% okay. Love the country. But one of the challenges I found when I was working on that visa was trying to learn the language, because I want to be able to do more than ask where the bathroom is. So what advice do you give to somebody who is just eager to get really kind of embedded into the culture of a new country, and also learn as much as they can about the language in a short amount of time?
Yes. Yeah. Well, learning a language is so important, but it's also a long game. So number one, I've been in Spain for so long, for 6 years, and I still feel like I'm learning. So it's a long game, but some of the best things that you can do, number one, is learn a little bit before you go. So like you said, you were trying to learn some of the language. I think that'll really help give you a leg up so that when you arrive, you're not so in the dark as to what people are saying. But also, starting to do language exchanges, and those you can actually do virtually. So you can do that before you leave. That's where there are a lot of platforms for this. One of them is called Tandem, where you can match with people around the world for free. You know that one?
I love Tandem.
Tandem is great. And so, that's where a foreigner can practice their English or whichever language you want to exchange with. So you can do English and Portuguese or whichever languages you want to do. And then once you're in a country, you can continue those kind of tandems. They happen in person, so you can do them in person. And just putting yourself out there. So you're going to go through a lot of growth and feeling uncomfortable. And that's just a part of learning the language. And I think it's really fun to see, yourself grow in different ways, and also kind of take on different personalities in different languages. So I think just have fun with the experience, but definitely, the more you can connect with the native speakers, the easier it's going to get. And of course, things like Duolingo and language classes and watching TV, listening to music, all of that helps as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also think that relying on those Facebook groups to ask about language apps, because there's so many different regions and different dialects that you may be learning a language that isn't maybe the best fit for the country that you're moving to. So I was working with Duolingo to learn Portuguese. And then when I was speaking to people from Portugal, they're like, that's Brazilian Portuguese. And even though there's some pieces we'll be able to get, it's not the same. So you have to find an app that's focused on European Portuguese. I wouldn't have known that. So asking questions to locals is definitely going to be beneficial, and also to expats as well.
Definitely.
So what would you say is something that you wish you knew before moving to Spain?
Something that I wish I knew before moving to Spain. I think for me, really knowing all of my options of how to live here. So when I came in 2015, I came on a visa. This is a very popular visa. It's a teaching assistant, so an English language teaching assistant. For me, that was in my mind the only option that I had to get my foot in the door. I'm not an English teacher. I didn't want to be one, but to get myself over here, that's what I did. And if I would have known then what I know now after writing this book, is that there are so many different visa options outside of teaching English that can allow you to live somewhere. So if I would have known that, maybe I could have, instead of spent that year, working in a public school, I could have spent that year, on my work or focus on something else if I would have known better. But you don't know what you don't know. And I think for a lot of people out there, you can save a lot of time if you know your options for actually being able to live in a certain country.
Mm-hmm. One of the things about moving abroad is while you may have it in your mind exactly the way that you want it to go, maybe you've visited the country a few times, you have a place to be settled, you may still have friends and family that are very uncomfortable and worried about you. How do you make people feel a little bit more comfortable with this huge transition?
Oh, Noelle, you are asking all the right questions. This is a big one. And I think, my community is for women over 30. So I think, when you're younger, when you're, fresh out of college, you maybe have more encouragement to go take that gap year, to go find yourself for a year before you start working, getting into the real world. But once you get to a certain age, people start questioning what you're doing because, I think they're just projecting their fears. I think for a lot of people, this idea to move abroad sounds really crazy because it's something they would never consider. And so it can be hard to to feel that you're getting the right support. And I think some things that you can let people know is let them know that you've done the research. They may not be clued into how viable an option this is, how many people are actually doing this. There are thousands of people out there who are moving abroad, or hundreds of thousands. So I think definitely let them know that you've done the research, let them know what the research is, and let them know what your plan is. It's not, it's fine if you're quitting your job to travel the world. That's totally, something that is a wonderful experience. But if that's not what you're doing and that's what they're afraid you're going to do, you're going to throw your career out the window, let people know, like, hey, I have this remote job. I'm moving with my remote job. I'm going to have healthcare. I'm going to be living here. And just give them a lot of information, because I think people are in the dark and they're just afraid of what they don't know. So the more information you can share, the better. But I think also don't let people's fears that they're projecting on you stop you from taking action on this dream. I think it's best, this is another reason why these Facebook groups are great, is because it's probably not the best to get advice about moving abroad from people who have never done it. So in these Facebook groups, you're going to be talking to people who have done it, who are 10 steps, 15 steps ahead of you, and can really empower you and ensure you that what you're doing is possible and not crazy at all.
Absolutely. Well, we have a question here from the audience. So many employees may be feeling anxious about the prospect of returning to the workplace. What can be done sensitively to proactive gauge their feelings and provide support?
Well, this is a good question, but I'm not an employer, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't feel like that question was for us, and that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and pivot here. So what resources are there for people who are interested in moving abroad?
Yes, definitely. There are so many resources out there. So we mentioned those Facebook groups. Go on Facebook, find your people, find the country, find the city that you're interested in. If you're interested in moving to Europe, definitely check out my book, my digital book, I'm Out of Here. You can go to my website, shehitrefresh.com. It's on there on the homepage. If you're a woman over 30 who's interested in doing this, please join my Facebook group. There's so many resources there, women that, like I said, that are in their up to their 70s doing this, that will empower you and inspire you. And I think also, because you're going to need to know exactly the steps you need to take, definitely connect with your local embassy or consulate for the country that you're interested in going to, and they can give you the most up-to-date information as to what the requirements are, and also the time that it's going to take. So I would say, since the pandemic and since that uptick in interest of people wanting to move abroad, the whole process has taken a lot longer. When I applied in 2015 for my visa to move to Spain, I got it back in about 2 weeks. I just had a friend who applied last year, and it took her about 8 months to get her visa approved. And so talk to the embassies and consulate to get all the most up-to-date information.
Absolutely. So one of the things that people may struggle with when they get to a new country is it may not be exactly what they expected. And this is something that we know can be expected when we move someplace that's new. But how do you discern this is someplace that's new, I'm feeling overwhelmed versus I'm not in the right city and country?
Yeah, this is hard. This is a great question because it's hard to know if those feelings are fleeting or if those feelings really are intuition telling you like this isn't your place. I think, it's important to give anything, to give it time, like anything in life, you need to give something time. Everything new is going to feel a bit uncomfortable. It can make you anxious and it can make you doubt if you had made the right decision. So give it time. Definitely don't isolate yourself. So it's really important to talk about these feelings, talk about them. You can talk about it with your friends and family, but I think it's also important, again, to talk about it with people who have been through what you're going through. So, if you're abroad, definitely make connections with some communities where you're living or even online to talk it out with people to see how they addressed this feeling. But then also, I think a lot of us get afraid of making a decision because we feel like we have to stick to what we said we were going to do. And I always tell people you can change your mind at any point. So let's say you do give it a go, you move abroad, and then you just feel after some time that it's not the right place. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to move to another city, another country, or even if the whole experience wasn't what you hoped it would have been, and you feel like you didn't, and now you're going to move back to the US, that's totally okay too. So I say just give it time, talk it out, and then reassess your feelings.
And I love that. And taking that time to reassess your feelings, I think is so important. But as we have you here as a subject matter expert, what I would love to hear is how do you feel that moving to Spain has enriched your life?
Love this question too. Well, I think, for anyone who's moved abroad, you will find that you are so much stronger than than you thought you were, right? Because you did all of this on your own. So I think it's really empowering. And I think it's just enriched my life because it's just given me a whole other possibility of how to live that's outside of the box that I think I was living in the US of like a 9 to 5. Going to the office is the only path to success, and living abroad and meeting so many people and creating this new life has shown me there are many paths to live life on your own terms.
I love that. There's so many different paths to happy. You have to be able to find your own. So Cepee, if you could just share again your book and different ways for folks to find you.
Yes, thank you, Noelle. So again, my website is She Hit Refresh. You can see the little logo here, shehitrefresh.com. And there you'll find my book, I'm Out of Here, on the homepage. And you'll find tons of resources, articles on how to move abroad.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your expertise. And thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks, Noelle. And thank you, Power to Fly. Thank you, everyone.